toka to mai pololo alema. Lolo agbabudo moi. Toka to mai pololo alema. Lolo agbabudo moi. Toka to mai pololo alema.
Hey, Kyle, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time of day it is, when you hear this message, I pray that your mind, your heart, and your spirit are all poised to receive, to accept, and respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. You know, every relationship comes at a cost. Every relationship comes at a cost. Personal relationships, romantic relationships, professional relationships. There's a cost associated with them. If you're with somebody who's hyper intellectual, it might cost you practical experiences, right? Because this person is really into abstract stuff. They're reading books and watching documentaries and, getting a lot of conceptual information, but they don't really get out there and get their hands dirty. They don't go to the place where it's happening and practice what they explore intellectually. Vice versa, if you're with somebody who's really action oriented, you may be out and about and doing things all the time, but you may not really give much thought to it. You may not really explore the intellectual ramifications of what you're doing together, right? You're just doing things. If you're with somebody who's from your neighborhood, right, you may not get international exposure. It might cost you international exposure, right? You're from the neighborhood. She's from the neighborhood. You guys know all the same people. It's really comfortable. You get along well, and you stick to what you know, and it's great. But the two of you would never consider going, getting passports and going to Bolivia, or going to Russia, or South Africa, or Brazil. It is just not on your radar at all. So having a real local relationship could cost you international exposure, and vice versa. If you're with someone who's from another country or from another culture, it could cost you local exposure. You got a woman from Herzegovina, what was it? Slovenia, right? She may not know what's happening at the roller rink on Friday night, right? They're going to have a special couples night at the roller rink on this Friday. She may not know that. So those are just the idea of what I mean when I say that every relationship comes at a cost. You can't be in two places at one time. You can't have two lifetimes in once. So there are things that your partner is going to naturally gravitate towards, and in order for you to have a relationship, you're going to have to gravitate toward those things too, and it's going to cost you certain things, right? That is the reality. Now, sometimes, however, the cost of the relationship outweighs the value of the relationship, and that's what I want to address with you today. When the cost of the relationship outweighs the value of the relationship, that's where you have a situation. That's where you have a real problem. And when I say the value of the relationship, I mean based on the fact that the value of a relationship is determined by its ability to contribute to your quality of life, physically, mentally, socially, economically, spiritually. The relationship has to make a contribution to your life. Likewise, a relationship, the value of a relationship is determined by its ability to contribute to your quality of life in terms of the past, right? The present, and the future. So you could think of really the past and the future, in my estimation, all fall into the category, or both fall into the category of legacy. So does your relationship contribute to your legacy, right, that you inherited from your ancestors? And does it contribute to the legacy that you want to leave for your children? Likewise, in the present, does the relationship contribute to your present day reputation? Does it enhance your standing in the world in some way, shape, or form? Now, when your relationship starts to compromise your quality of life in any of those ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, economically, spiritually, past, present, future, here's where the lesson becomes crucial. And I want you to catch this. When your relationship compromises the quality of life, then it's your duty, first and foremost, to be quick to recognize this fact. First thing is you got to recognize it. I'm not talking about the person does things that you don't like. The person has idiosyncrasies and quirks and just oddities, right? They're awkward and antisocial in certain ways. I don't mean like that. I don't even mean the extreme cases where the person has some really extreme vice, like they're a drug addict or something like that. I don't mean like that. I just mean that this relationship, is, like I said, it compromises. It doesn't add value to your life, right? It just doesn't add value to life. You got to recognize it. And it can be so subtle. In my experience, it can be so subtle because of emotions. You love this person, right? You want to love this person. You're attracted to this person. And so you're constantly justifying what isn't happening, right? Or you're rationalizing what is happening. But the key, first and foremost, is to just be quick to recognize the fact that, you know what, this relationship is costing me more than it's giving me in terms of my quality of life, right? Now, within our own spiritual community, we are practicing the Itadokun, which is a bi-weekly divination. And maybe a month ago or so, we saw an Odu that really exemplifies this fact and what happens when you refuse to recognize the fact that this relationship is costing more than the value it adds. And so that's the lesson I want to share with you. But before I do, let me remind you that this is the Orisha Lifestyle Academy, and I'm your instructor, Obafemi Origuwan. Today, I want to share with you a brief lesson on cutting your losses, right, when the time is ripe. In the verse that I alluded to earlier, Orunmila and Eshu were very good friends. Orunmila and Eshu care about one another. They are, they road dogs. They are always together, frick and frack, right? And the nature of the relationship is that Orunmila gets assignments. He gets these divine assignments, and he goes from city to city, from kingdom to kingdom, and he resolves all kinds of problems in those places. That's why they call for him. If people are sick, he heals the sick. He enriches the poor. He resolves conflicts. He helps kings and warriors and farmers and merchants, and everybody goes to Orunmila for help and support. And so, in every kingdom that they visit, Orunmila does his thing. He's recognized and he's compensated accordingly. Everyone loves Orunmila and the way he works. Now, and he's doing this work with Eshu at his side. But the problem is, for all of the gain in reputation and fame and wealth and compensation that Orunmila gets, Eshu also creates different kinds of problems for him. Different things happen along the way. You can imagine, like, if you were a contractor, and you go out and you build, right? You get these jobs to build houses, and you got a partner and you guys work together, and you get out there and you do these jobs in record time, no waste of resources. Everything is fantastic. But what happens? Your guy gets paid and then he goes out and gets drunk, and then he doesn't show up, or he ends up going to jail, and then you got to go and bail him out of jail, right? Or your guy is there and he works and he does fantastic work, but he starts flirting with the boss's wife. You guys are out there, you do the job fantastically, but the guy goes out and he gets arrested for shoplifting. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, for every benefit that this person creates for you in this specialized area of your work, outside of that area, he creates some kind of a liability that ends up compromising your ability to truly enjoy the spoils of your labor. And so this is how it was happening for Orunmila. And so Orunmila had a big assignment. He had a really big job. And he went, consulted Ifa, and Ifa said, Orunmila, you got this job coming up, and you've been told before that you can't take Eshu along with you on the job. On this next one, you really can't do it. And so Orunmila made the sacrifice, but he loved Eshu so much, he took the journey, and what did he do? He brought Eshu along with him anyway. And soon after they arrived, sure enough, Orunmila could see the signs. But this time he recognized it. He says, I know how this story ends, and it's whack. I don't like this story. So Orunmila now goes back, and he's got to, talk to the Babalawo again to say, I get it, and I'm ready to do what's necessary. And so now they tell him, Orunmila, you got to do something extra, because you've got Eshu out here on the mission with you. You can't just abandon him. You're going to have to sweeten the deal. And so Orunmila does. And he goes and he gives and gives and gives all these bonus treats, paying Eshu off basically to leave or to stay in this place and not accompany Orunmila on the next portion of the journey. Eshu accepts, and Eshu is able to do even better work in this place. And the kingdom in question where Orunmila was Odara. It's the kingdom of Odara. And so if you're a practitioner, you'll know this is one of the ways that we praise Eshu Odara. It is because of this particular verse that Orunmila left Eshu in Odara, where Eshu was able to do fantastic work, as well as permit Orunmila to do fantastic work without in any way creating any liability that would compromise Orunmila's quality of life. Okay? And so I want you to really give some thought to what this means. I have personally lived this Odu. I've lived this Odu. I have had relationships where, on paper, I was doing phenomenally. My work was good. I was making really good money. I was recognized and respected for who I am and what I do. But on the other side of the equation, this relationship was costing me all of my peace of mind. The relationship was a complete drain on my mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. No matter what I do, I cannot seem to get on the other side of this liability. It never stops taking. You hear the gift that never stops giving. Sometimes you have a relationship that never stops taking. And it just drains and drains and drains and drains your energy. You've got to recognize, at the first instance, you got to recognize, hey, you know what? Although I'm getting something out of this, it isn't that the person is, defective. This is why earlier I alluded to the fact that I'm not talking about extreme cases where you're dealing with somebody who has some kind of extreme addiction or something like that, right? I'm talking about somebody who's, for all intents and purposes, high quality. This is a highly functioning individual. They work and they make money and they, take care of household duties, and they're highly functional. But they have some liabilities that absolutely cannot be overlooked. They cannot be ignored. They cannot be even managed. It's something that is going to compromise your quality of life, right? And so when you see those patterns emerge, the first thing that you have to do is you got to recognize that fact. That's the first thing. You got to do the math. In my mind, I was constantly compensating and rationalizing this person's behavior, constantly saying that, if I just do something a little bit differently. Oh, she mentioned that, she needed more of this or less of that. And so if I do those things, then it's going to have the desired effect, and she will change her behavior and her liabilities will disappear. But that isn't the case. It's not the case. And so when it isn't the case, again, the first thing is don't lie to yourself, right? Recognize that this is a liability that will never stop taking. And then you go about the business of determining, well, how are you going to cut your losses? Okay, how do you cut your losses? This particular Odu tells us that this is where the payoff becomes important. Okay, this is where you have to pay off these people sometimes, depending on what the relationship is. If you have, for example, you're a man, you got children, you got to pay this woman off, right? And it may not even be fair, right? You may be paying more than what you know it's worth, right? You may be paying her off to do a job that you don't even want to have done, right? She may not be taking care of the duties and activities exactly the way that you would like them to be taken care of, but ultimately that's not what you're paying for. What you're paying for is this person to disappear. That's what you're paying for, right? When you and I know that's harsh, but this is the way that it needs to be understood. And I think particularly for men, sometimes you're paying somebody to go away. Sometimes you have to look at it as, this is the price that I pay to not have this liability. This is the price that I pay to cut the cost, right? The relationship moves into a space wherein it's transactional, and it's easier for me to pay you $1,000. It's more valuable for me to pay you $1,000 than it is for me to be constantly trying to put out the fires associated with relating to you, right? So this is the psychology and the logic that you got to use when you start to cut your losses. And the only way that those decisions can be made with confidence, with ease, with happiness, is if you are like Orunmila, carrying out your mission. See, because in my own experience, like I said, I had it all. Everything I could want for, I had. The only problem was I couldn't enjoy it because I had a relationship that was constantly demanding my attention to be putting out fires and running in circles, right? So I wasn't enjoying any of the things that I had worked for. I wasn't enjoying any of the things that I was creating, right? And so when you cut your losses and you are focused on your mission, you're doing your life's work, you're engaged in activities and talking to people and going places that feed your spirit and really enrich your quality of life, then that's where you focus, and those benefits become that much more valuable. You're able to cherish those experiences so much more because now all you're doing is writing a check, and you're not having to dedicate all this mental, emotional, physical, spiritual energy to the distractions. Okay? And so this lesson is so important for anybody who wants to progress in life. It's not about burning bridges. It's not about severing ties. It's not about any abandoning people. It's about really recognizing when a relationship outweighs the value that it is meant to contribute, it's in your best interest to let that relationship go and cultivate a relationship with your destiny instead. Aboro aboye, aboshishe.